What happens when a woman proudly shares photos of her romantic dinner with another man, only to discover her husband has been quietly documenting everything? I thought I deserved happiness, and my family agreed, until legal papers arrived at my sister's wedding reception, revealing the truth I'd hidden for months. Can a marriage survive when everyone believed the wrong person was the villain? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as I scrolled through my phone, a small smile playing on my lips. Julian had texted me good morning, something David hadn't done in months, maybe years. I couldn't even remember the last time my husband had made me feel noticed. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly switched to my email app. David appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, his face unreadable as always. He poured himself coffee and asked if I had slept well. I told him I was up late finishing a work report. He nodded and said nothing else. The silence between us felt normal now. We had become strangers living in the same house, going through motions for the sake of our children. Lily, our 7-year-old, bounced into the kitchen asking for pancakes. Evan, who was 5, followed close behind, dragging his stuffed elephant. I made them breakfast while David checked his phone. Lily looked between us and asked why Daddy was so quiet lately. I told her Daddy was just stressed with work and kissed the top of her head. David glanced at me but said nothing. He finished his coffee and told the kids he loved them. Then he left for work without saying goodbye to me. I told myself this was normal. All marriages went through phases. David was emotionally unavailable, always had been. He focused on his engineering projects and left me to handle everything else. The house, the kids, the social calendar, the emotional labor of our entire family. I was exhausted, and I deserved to feel appreciated. Julian appreciated me. Julian saw me. I dropped the kids at school and drove to work, checking my phone at every red light. Julian confirmed our dinner reservation for that evening. My heart fluttered. I replied with a heart emoji and told him I couldn't wait. He said he had been thinking about me all morning. This was what I deserved, this feeling of being wanted. At the office, I tried to focus on the marketing campaign I was coordinating, but my mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. My coworker and closest friend, Nadia, rolled her chair over to my desk and asked why I was smiling. I told her I had plans after work. She raised an eyebrow and asked if those plans involved a certain handsome architect. I blushed and told her to keep her voice down. Nadia laughed and said I deserved to be happy. She said David had been taking me for granted for years, and it was about time I did something for myself. I felt validated. Nadia understood. She had been through a difficult divorce herself and always told me that life was too short to be miserable. The day dragged on. I sat through 2 meetings and answered dozens of emails, but all I could think about was seeing Julian. We had met 3 months ago at a professional networking event. He was divorced, charming, and attentive. He asked questions about my life and actually listened to the answers. He made me feel like I mattered. David never made me feel like I mattered. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, I was already touching up my makeup in the bathroom. Nadia gave me a knowing smile as I grabbed my coat. She told me to have fun and winked. I felt a small pang of guilt as I walked to my car, but I pushed it away. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Julian and I were just friends. We were networking. We enjoyed each other's company. And if it felt like more than that, well, maybe that was what I needed. The wine bar was across town, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Julian had chosen it specifically for that reason. It was upscale, dimly lit, with private booths and candles on every table. He was already there when I arrived, standing to greet me with a warm hug that lasted a moment longer than necessary. We slid into the booth and ordered a bottle of wine. Julian asked about my day, and I vented about work stress and home stress and how tired I was of feeling invisible. He reached across the table and took my hand. He said I was anything but invisible. He said I was radiant. I felt my face flush. This was what I had been missing. This connection, this attention, this feeling of being seen as a woman and not just as a mother or a wife or an employee. We talked for hours about our childhoods, our dreams, our disappointments. Julian told me about his divorce and how his ex-wife had stopped caring about him. I told him I understood that feeling. I said David and I had been drifting apart for years. Julian asked if I had considered leaving. I said I had thought about it, but it was complicated. The kids, the house, the finances, everything was tangled together. He squeezed my hand and said life was too short to be unhappy. The candlelight flickered between us, casting soft shadows across the table. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the scene. The wine glasses, the candle, the intimate atmosphere. Julian asked if I was sure that was a good idea. I laughed and told him my Instagram story was semi-private, just close friends and family. I said everyone would think it was a work dinner. I posted the photo with the caption, "Finally feeling alive." Within minutes, Nadia and 2 other friends had liked it and left supportive comments. "You glow, girl," and "He better step up." I felt a surge of validation. My friends understood. They could see I was struggling in my marriage, and they supported me finding happiness. Julian and I stayed until the restaurant started closing. He walked me to my car and hugged me goodbye. This time I hugged him back just as tightly. He whispered that he couldn't stop thinking about me. I said I felt the same way. I drove home in a daze, replaying the evening in my mind. I felt more alive than I had in years. When I pulled into the driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for a single lamp in the living room. I walked inside and found David on the couch, reading. He looked up and asked where I had been. I told him I had drinks with Nadia to decompress after a stressful week. He asked why I hadn't texted to let him know I would be home late. I felt a flash of irritation and asked if he was seriously trying to control my schedule now. I said I was an adult and didn't need to report my every move. David closed his book slowly. He said he wasn't trying to control me, he just wondered where I was. I said he was being paranoid and jealous. I told him maybe if he paid more attention to me during normal hours, I wouldn't need to blow off steam with my friends. He stared at me for a long moment and then said he was going to bed. I watched him walk upstairs and felt a mixture of anger and guilt, but mostly anger. He had no right to make me feel bad for having a social life. I poured myself a glass of water and checked my phone. Julian had texted saying he had a wonderful time and hoped we could do it again soon. I smiled and replied that I would love that. As I headed upstairs, I passed the kitchen and noticed David's phone on the counter. The screen lit up with a calendar reminder. Maple and Fifth, 9:30 a.m. He must have forgotten it downstairs. I glanced at the notification, assuming it was a work meeting, and continued to the bedroom. David was already in bed, facing the wall. I changed into pajamas and slipped under the covers. The space between us felt like an ocean. I fell asleep thinking about Julian's smile and the way he made me feel beautiful. I didn't notice that David's laptop was open on the dresser, a new folder labeled Household visible on the screen before the monitor dimmed to black. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and the sound of David moving around the room. I rolled over and saw him standing by the nightstand, holding his phone. Something about his posture made me alert. I asked what he was doing. He turned to look at me, his expression neutral, and asked who Julian was. My heart stopped. I sat up and demanded to know why he was asking. David said he had seen a text message. I realized with horror that I must have left my phone unlocked on the nightstand when I went to the bathroom during the night. I felt a wave of anger crash over me. I asked if he had gone through my phone. He said my phone was sitting there unlocked, and a text notification had appeared on the screen. He said he hadn't been snooping. He had simply seen it. I told him he had no right to look at my private messages. I said he had violated my trust and invaded my privacy. David asked again who Julian was. I told him Julian was a colleague from work, and David was being completely paranoid. He asked why a colleague was texting me about our next escape. I felt my face flush. I said it was a joke, an inside reference to a stressful project we were both working on. I said David was reading things that weren't there because he was insecure and jealous. David stared at me for a long moment. Then he said he needed space to think. He grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the closet and walked out of the room. I followed him into the hallway and watched as he went into the guest bedroom. I told him he was overreacting and being dramatic. He closed the door without responding. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding. How dare he act like the victim when he was the one who had been emotionally absent for years? How dare he make me feel guilty for finally finding someone who appreciated me? I went back to the bedroom and checked my phone. Julian had sent another text asking if I was free for lunch that week. I replied that I would check my schedule. Then I deleted the entire text thread, just to be safe. The morning routine with the kids was tense. Lily asked why Daddy was sleeping in the other room. I told her Daddy wasn't feeling well and needed extra rest. She looked worried but didn't push further. Evan asked if Daddy was sick. I said no, he just needed quiet time. I dropped the kids at school and drove to the office, my mind racing. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. As soon as I got to my desk, I rolled my chair over to Nadia's cubicle. I told her everything. About David finding the texts, about the accusation, about him moving to the guest room. Nadia listened with a sympathetic expression and then shook her head. She said David was acting controlling and insecure. She said it was a classic sign of a man who knew he was losing his wife and was trying to manipulate the situation. She told me I had every right to have friends and a social life. She said I deserved to be happy and shouldn't feel guilty about that. I felt validated again. Nadia was right. David was trying to make me feel bad for something completely innocent. Julian and I were just friends. We enjoyed each other's company. There was nothing wrong with that. During our morning team meeting, I found it hard to concentrate. My coworker Sam asked me a question about the marketing timeline, and I snapped at him, saying I would send him the details later. Sam looked taken aback, but didn't say anything. I felt bad for a moment, but pushed the feeling away. At lunch, I checked Instagram. My story from the night before had gotten more engagement. Nadia had commented, "You glow, girl," and another friend had written, "He better step up." I felt a warm sense of support. My friends could see that I was struggling, and they were on my side. A part of me wondered if I should take the post down. But why should I? I hadn't done anything wrong. It was just a photo of a nice dinner. If David had a problem with that, it was his issue, not mine. The afternoon dragged. I kept checking my phone for messages from Julian. He finally texted around 3 o'clock, saying he couldn't stop thinking about our evening together. He asked when he could see me again. I told him I needed a few days because things at home were tense. He said he understood and would wait as long as I needed. I felt a rush of affection. Julian was so patient, so understanding. Everything David wasn't. When I got home that evening, David's car was already in the driveway. I walked inside and found him helping Evan with a puzzle at the kitchen table. Lily was doing homework at the counter. The scene looked so normal, so domestic, but there was a coldness in the air. David barely looked at me. He asked the kids if they wanted spaghetti for dinner. They both said yes. He started pulling out pots and ingredients, moving around the kitchen like I wasn't there. I felt angry at being ignored. I told him we needed to talk. He said we could talk after the kids went to bed. I said I wanted to talk now. He repeated that we would talk later and continued cooking. I stormed upstairs, feeling dismissed and invalidated. In the bedroom, I noticed his laptop was closed on the dresser. I wondered what he had been doing on it. I tried to open it, but it was password protected. I felt a spike of suspicion. What was he hiding? After dinner, David helped the kids with their bedtime routine. I heard him reading them stories, his voice calm and patient. Lily asked him why he seemed sad. He told her he was just tired. She said she loved him. He said he loved her too, so much. I felt a pang of something, guilt maybe, or sadness, but I pushed it away. David was the one who had created this distance between us. He was the one who had stopped trying. After the kids were asleep, I went down to the living room to talk to him. He was sitting on the couch with a folder in his lap. I asked what that was. He said it was some paperwork he was organizing. I asked if it was for work. He said it was household documents. I found that odd but didn't press. I told him we needed to clear the air about Julian. David said there was nothing to clear. He said he knew I was lying and that he wasn't going to play games. I felt a flash of indignation and told him I wasn't lying. I was just trying to have a normal social life. He asked if I was having an affair. The directness of the question shocked me. I told him absolutely not, and how dare he accuse me of that? I said he was being paranoid and controlling. I said this was exactly why I needed space from him, because he was suffocating me with his suspicion and jealousy. David looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then he said he hoped I was telling the truth, because lies had a way of coming out eventually. I told him he was being dramatic and walked back upstairs. That night, I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling. I could hear David moving around downstairs. I wondered what he was doing. Part of me felt guilty for lying to him, but a larger part felt justified. He had driven me to this. He had made me feel so alone that I had no choice but to seek connection elsewhere. Around midnight, I heard a sound that made me pause. It was a phone ringing, but muffled, like it was coming from another room. I got up and crept to the top of the stairs. I could see light coming from under the door of David's home office. I tiptoed down the hallway and stood outside the door. I could hear David's voice, low and measured. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious. I pressed my ear to the door and caught fragments. Yes, that's correct, and I understand the timeline, and I'll have everything ready. Who was he talking to at midnight? Was he talking to a lawyer? Was he planning to divorce me? A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I went back to the bedroom and grabbed my phone. I texted Nadia, asking if she thought David was planning to leave me. She replied immediately, saying that men like David didn't have the guts to leave. She said he was probably just trying to scare me into submission. I wanted to believe her. I tried to fall asleep, but my mind kept racing. The next morning, David was already gone when I woke up. There was a note on the kitchen counter saying he had an early meeting and would be home late. I felt relief and frustration at the same time. Over the next few days, David continued to sleep in the guest room. We barely spoke except about logistics with the kids. I noticed he had started taking his laptop with him to work, which he never used to do. And sometimes I would catch him on his phone, texting someone, but he would quickly put it away when I came into the room. One evening, I was in the garage looking for a box of holiday decorations when I noticed David's car trunk was slightly open. I lifted it and saw a hard-shell case I didn't recognize. My curiosity got the better of me. I opened the case and saw a thin binder labeled Utilities and a USB stick with a date label. I opened the binder and saw printed screenshots. My Instagram story, text message previews, credit card statements with certain charges highlighted. My blood ran cold. David was building a file on me. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. David was standing in the doorway of the garage, his expression calm. He asked what I was doing. I asked what the hell the binder was. He said it was exactly what it looked like. He said he was protecting himself. I told him he was insane. He said he was being careful. Then he closed the trunk, took the case, and walked back into the house. I stood in the garage, my hands shaking. This was serious. David wasn't just upset, he was planning something. That night, his phone lit up on the kitchen counter while he was upstairs. The screen showed a missed call from no caller ID. A moment later, a text appeared. Documents ready for pickup Tuesday. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone and then deleted my camera roll in case he checked. My heart was pounding. David came back downstairs and picked up his phone. He saw the notifications and glanced at me, but said nothing. He pocketed the phone and told me he was going to take a shower. I watched him go, feeling a mix of anger and fear. What documents? Who was he meeting? I needed to regain control of this situation. I decided I would be more careful, more discreet. I would make sure David had nothing to use against me. But even as I made that decision, I texted Julian and asked if we could meet the next evening. I needed to feel seen again. I needed to feel like I mattered. Julian replied immediately, saying he would be there. The next few weeks were a strange dance of pretense and silence. David and I moved around each other like ghosts, communicating only about the children's schedules and household necessities. He continued to sleep in the guest room. I continued to see Julian whenever I could arrange it. I was more careful now. I created a separate messaging app that David wouldn't think to check. I deleted location data from my photos. I paid for dinners with cash instead of credit cards. I thought I was being smart, but I couldn't stop posting on social media. It felt too good to share glimpses of my happiness, even if I had to be vague about the details. My friends rallied around me, leaving supportive comments that validated my choices. Nadia kept telling me I was glowing, that I seemed happier than I had been in years, and I was happier. When I was with Julian, I felt like myself again. He made me laugh. He asked about my dreams and actually cared about the answers. He told me I was beautiful, intelligent, and deserving of so much more than I was getting at home. One evening in late October, Julian suggested we meet at the Riverside embankment for a walk. It was a beautiful location, popular with joggers and couples, but far enough from my usual haunts that I felt safe. I agreed, excited to see him outside of restaurants and bars where we had to whisper and hide in corners. We met just before sunset. The autumn air was crisp, and the trees along the river were brilliant with red and gold leaves. Julian took my hand as we walked, and I felt a thrill run through me. This was real. This connection was real. We talked about everything: his latest architectural project, my frustrations at work, the books we were reading, the places we wanted to travel. Julian said he had always wanted to see Greece. I said I had dreamed of going there since college, but David had never been interested. Julian stopped walking and turned to face me. He said I shouldn't have to give up my dreams for someone who didn't appreciate me. He said I deserved a partner who wanted to explore the world with me. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was what I needed to hear. This validation, this promise of something better. Julian pulled me into a hug, and I rested my head on his chest. We stood like that for a long moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. I felt safe. I felt seen. What I didn't notice was the woman in running gear who jogged past us, slowing slightly as she recognized me. Mrs. Patel, our neighbor from 3 streets over. She was part of David's running group, though I had only met her a handful of times. Mrs. Patel glanced back once, her expression unreadable, and then continued her run. I didn't see her. I was too wrapped up in Julian's arms and the fantasy of a different life. When we finally pulled apart, I checked my phone and realized I needed to get home before the kids' bedtime. Julian walked me to my car and kissed me on the cheek. He said he would text me later. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. What I didn't know was that Mrs. Patel had gone home and told her husband what she had seen. Her husband, Dev Patel, was in David's running group and considered him a friend. Dev debated for an hour whether to say anything. Finally, he sent David a carefully worded text. Saw something today that concerned me. Call me if you want to talk. David called him immediately. Dev told him what his wife had seen at the riverside embankment. David thanked him quietly and said he was handling the situation. That night, after I came home and went through the motions of bedtime with the kids, David went out to the garage. He opened his locked workbench drawer and pulled out the binder I had seen weeks before. He added Dev's text message to the file, along with a note about the date, time, and location of the sighting. Then he opened a folder on his laptop labeled Archive A and uploaded several new documents: bank statements, phone records he had requested from our carrier, screenshots of my Instagram activity showing location tags and timestamps. He was building a case, piece by piece, with the careful methodology of an engineer. Meanwhile, I was upstairs texting Julian, completely unaware. The next day, I was feeling bold. I decided to post a vague message in our family group chat about feeling unsupported. I wrote that I had been going through a difficult time and wished the people closest to me could see how much I was struggling. My mother, Linda, immediately replied with heart emojis and asked if David was being difficult again. I said I didn't want to get into specifics, but yes, things at home were hard. I said I felt like I was carrying everything alone. My sister Bryn, who was deep in wedding planning, replied with a concerned emoji and said she hoped things got better soon. My father Robert didn't reply at all, which I found odd but didn't think much about. What I didn't see was the reaction from David's side of the family. His sister Cara saw the message and immediately called David. She asked him what was going on and why I was making vague posts about being unsupported. David told her he couldn't talk about it yet, but asked her to trust him. Cara said she trusted him completely and didn't believe a word of my narrative. David's mother Margaret also saw the post and called her son. She said something didn't feel right about my message. She said I was playing victim and she suspected there was more to the story. David asked her to be patient and said the truth would come out soon. That evening, I noticed David was organizing more paperwork in his home office. The door was open a crack, and I could see him sorting documents into folders. I walked past and tried to see what he was doing, but he noticed me and calmly closed the door. I felt a spike of anxiety. What was he planning? Later that night, I was in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard a printer start up in David's office. It was after 11 o'clock. Why was he printing something so late? I got up and walked down the hallway. I could see light under his office door. I tried the handle, but it was locked. I knocked and asked what he was doing. He said he was finishing some work and would be done soon. I stood there for a moment, frustrated and anxious, then went back to bed. About 20 minutes later, I heard the office door open. I peeked out and saw David walking toward the stairs with a stack of papers held face down. He went out to his car, put the papers inside, and came back in. The next morning, I tried to check his car while he was in the shower, but he had locked it. I felt my control slipping, and I didn't like it. I needed reassurance. I texted Julian and asked if we could meet for coffee. He said he had a busy day but could meet me briefly during lunch. I agreed immediately. At lunch, I vented to Julian about David's strange behavior. I said I thought he was seeing a lawyer. Julian asked if I was worried. I said I was more annoyed than worried. I said if David wanted a divorce, he should just say so instead of playing games. Julian took my hand across the table and said that whatever happened, I wouldn't be alone. He said he would be there for me. I felt a rush of gratitude and something deeper, something that felt like love. When I got back to the office, Nadia asked how lunch was. I told her it was good, that Julian was being supportive. She said I deserved that kind of support. She asked if I was worried about David's behavior. I said I thought he was just trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't going to let him control me with fear. That weekend, I decided to check the car again while David was outside playing with the kids. I found the glove compartment unlocked and opened it. Inside was a wall planner, the kind you tear off each day. There was a date circled in red ink 2 weeks away. labeled Final MTG 2 p.m. My heart started racing. Final meeting for what? Divorce? Custody? I took a photo of the planner with my phone and put it back exactly as I found it. Then I went inside and texted Nadia the photo. I asked if she thought this meant David was about to serve me with papers. Nadia replied that he was probably just bluffing. She said men like David loved to make threats but rarely followed through. She told me not to worry and to focus on my own happiness. I wanted to believe her, but the anxiety gnawed at me. That night, David told me we needed to discuss some practical matters. He said we needed to talk about finances and the kids' schedule. I said I wasn't interested in having that conversation. He said we needed to have it whether I wanted to or not. I told him he couldn't force me to do anything. He said he wasn't trying to force me, he was trying to be civil and handle things properly. I asked what things he was referring to. He said I knew exactly what he meant. I felt my face flush with anger. I told him he was being cryptic and manipulative. He said he was being clear, and I was choosing not to listen. Then he walked away. I stood in the kitchen, shaking with frustration. I felt like I was losing control of the narrative. I needed to regain the upper hand. I decided to post something on Instagram that would show I was thriving, despite whatever David was planning. I chose a photo from a recent outing, just a sunset, nothing incriminating, and captioned it, "Grateful for new perspectives." The likes and supportive comments poured in within minutes. I felt better. What I didn't know was that David had created a burner Instagram account and was following me. He screenshot every post, every story, every comment. He was documenting everything I put into the public record. The gap between what I believed I was doing and what was actually happening was growing wider every day, and I was completely blind to it. November arrived with cold rain and grey skies. The tension in our house had become unbearable. David and I barely spoke, unless absolutely necessary. The kids noticed, of course. Lily started asking more questions about why Mommy and Daddy didn't eat dinner together anymore. Evan became clingy, refusing to let David out of his sight when he was home. I told myself they would be fine. Kids were resilient. Once David and I figured out our situation, everything would settle into a new normal. Lily's school recital was scheduled for the first week of November. It was one of those events where all the families attended, grandparents, siblings, cousins. I dreaded it because I knew both David's family and mine would be there, and the awkwardness would be palpable. The recital was held in the community centre hall, a large space with folding chairs arranged in rows, and a small stage at the front. I arrived early and saved seats for my parents and Bryn. David arrived separately and sat with his parents and his sister Cara on the opposite side of the aisle. There was a visible gap between the two family groups, like an invisible line had been drawn. Margaret, David's mother, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either, just cold and assessing. Thomas, David's father, gave me a polite nod but didn't smile. Cara outright ignored me. My mother, Linda, immediately sensed the tension and whispered to me, asking if everything was okay. I said everything was fine, we were just sitting separately because the families arrived at different times. She didn't look convinced but didn't push. The recital began, and I tried to focus on Lily. She looked adorable in her white dress and flower crown, standing in the second row of the children's chorus. They sang 3 songs, simple, sweet pieces about friendship and nature. I filmed the performance on my phone and felt a surge of maternal pride. When it was over, the kids ran off stage to find their parents. Lily scanned the audience, and her face fell slightly when she saw David and me on opposite sides. She ran to David first, throwing her arms around his waist. He bent down and hugged her tightly, telling her she did a wonderful job. I felt a pang of something, jealousy, maybe, or hurt. I stood and called to Lily. She ran over and I pulled her into a hug, positioning us both for a quick selfie. I posted it immediately with the caption, "My beautiful star." After the performance, there was a reception in the adjoining room with cookies and punch. The families mingled awkwardly. I stood with my parents while David stood with his. Lily and Evan moved between the two groups, confused by the division. I pulled out my phone to check the responses to my post. Nadia had already commented, "She's gorgeous. You must be so proud." I felt validated. At least someone saw that I was a good mother. I glanced across the room and caught Cara staring at me through the window. Her expression was sharp, almost accusatory. I looked away, irritated. Cara had always been dramatic and overprotective of David. My father Robert pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to talk about what was going on between David and me. I said there was nothing to talk about. He said the family could sense something was wrong and wanted to help. I told him I appreciated the concern, but it was between David and me. Robert looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He said he hoped I was being honest with everyone, especially myself. His words stung more than I expected. As family started to leave, Lily took my hand and asked why Grandma Margaret seemed mad at me. I told her Grandma wasn't mad, she was just tired. Lily asked if Mommy and Daddy were going to stop living together. The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I bent down to her level and said, "Of course not. Everything was fine." I said Mommy and Daddy just needed to work through some grown-up things. She looked uncertain, but nodded. In the parking lot, David helped the kids into his car. He had driven separately, a new pattern that had emerged over the past weeks. I watched them leave, feeling strangely hollow. My mother asked if I wanted to come over for tea. I said I needed to get home. She hugged me tightly and told me to call if I needed anything. I promised I would. That night, I texted Julian and told him I was having a difficult evening. He asked if I wanted to talk on the phone. I said yes. We talked for over an hour. He listened to everything. My frustration with David, my anxiety about the kids, my sense that my in-laws were turning against me. He said I was handling an impossible situation with grace. He said I was stronger than I knew. I felt better after we hung up. Julian understood me in a way David never had. What I didn't know was that Cara had seen me on my phone during the reception, smiling at something on the screen while my daughter was asking me questions. She had taken note of it and mentioned it to David later that night. The following Sunday, my mother invited me and the kids to her house for dinner. She specifically said David was not invited, which I found both comforting and concerning. I accepted because I needed my family's support. When we arrived, my father was setting the table, and Bryn was in the kitchen helping my mother with the roast. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary. Evan and Lily ran to the living room to play with the toys my parents kept for them. Over dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to my marriage. My mother asked directly what was going on with David. I felt all eyes on me. I took a breath and decided to tell them my version of the truth. I said David had become distant and cold over the past year. I said he refused to communicate about our problems. I said he spent all his time working and had no emotional energy left for me or the kids. I said I felt like a single parent even though I was married. My mother's face filled with sympathy. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said I deserved better than that. Bryn asked if I had suggested marriage counseling. I said I had tried to bring it up multiple times, but David always shut down the conversation or said he was too busy. That was a lie. I had never suggested counseling, but it sounded true, and my family believed me. My father was quieter, his expression thoughtful. He asked if there was anything else going on that I hadn't mentioned. I felt a flash of panic and asked what he meant. He said he just wanted to make sure I was telling them everything. I said of course I was. Bryn shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She said her wedding was in 6 weeks, and she really hoped our family drama wouldn't overshadow her day. I felt a spike of irritation and told her not to be selfish. She looked hurt and said she wasn't being selfish, She just wanted one day that wasn't about someone else's problems. My mother intervened, saying we all needed to support each other during difficult times. She said Bryn's wedding would be beautiful and nothing would ruin it. I apologized to Bryn and said I was just stressed. She said she understood but looked unconvinced. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside and said I was welcome to stay with them if things at home became unbearable. I thanked her, but said I wasn't ready to leave yet. She said the offer stood whenever I needed it. On the drive home, Lily asked why Daddy didn't come to dinner. I said Grandma and Grandpa wanted to spend time just with us. She asked if Daddy was sad about that. I said I didn't know. The following week, David seemed to be preparing for something. I noticed him making phone calls in his office with the door closed. I tried to listen, but could only catch fragments of words. I saw him take more folders out to his car. His calendar had multiple new entries, all vague: meeting, appointment, drop-off. Then one evening, I saw a text preview on his phone while he was upstairs. Documents ready for pickup Tuesday. The sender was listed as RM. I asked him about it casually when he came back down. He said it was related to a work contract. I asked which contract. He said I wouldn't know the details and it wasn't important. I didn't believe him, but I didn't know how to prove he was lying. That night, I searched his car while he was giving the kids a bath. I found nothing new except that the red circled date on the planner had been crossed out and replaced with a new date 1 week later, labeled Final MTG 11:10 a.m. I took another photo and sent it to Nadia. I asked if she thought I should be worried. She said David was probably just trying to psych me out. She said men did that when they felt like they were losing control. She told me to stay strong and not let him intimidate me. I tried to believe her, but a knot of anxiety was growing in my chest, tighter every day. A few days later, David asked if we could talk. He said he wanted to discuss a plan for co-parenting and finances. I said I wasn't interested in that conversation because we weren't separated. He said we might as well be, given the current state of things. I said that was his choice, not mine. He said it was both of our choices, whether I wanted to admit it or not. I told him he was being cold and calculating. He said he was being realistic. He said we needed to think about what was best for Lily and Evan. I said what was best for them was having their parents together. He looked at me with an expression that was almost sad and said that wasn't always true. The conversation ended there. I walked away feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. That weekend, I decided to text Julian and ask if we could meet for a walk. I needed to clear my head. He agreed and we met at the beach promenade on Saturday afternoon. It was a beautiful day, unseasonably warm for November. The ocean glittered in the sunlight, and a light breeze carried the smell of salt water. Julian and I walked hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. He asked how I was holding up. I said I was managing, but felt like David was planning something. Julian suggested I should consider talking to a lawyer myself, just to protect my interests. I said I didn't want to escalate things. He said sometimes you had to be proactive to protect yourself. I didn't want to think about lawyers and divorce. I wanted to think about this moment, the sun, the ocean, the feeling of Julian's hand in mine. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the sunset. Julian's hand was barely visible at the edge of the frame. I posted it with the caption, "Grateful for people who see me." The responses were immediate and supportive. Nadia commented with flame emojis. My mother liked it. Even Bryn left a heart. I felt validated and seen. What I didn't notice was that David also saw the post. He was at home with the kids, helping them build a fort in the living room, when his burner Instagram account pinged with the notification. He opened the post, studied the image carefully, and took a screenshot. Then he added it to the folder labeled Archive A and made a note of the date, time, and location tag. He said nothing to the kids about it. He just continued building the fort, listening to their laughter. knowing that he was doing what needed to be done to protect them. The gap between my perception and reality was now a chasm, and I still couldn't see it. 2 days after the beach walk, David confronted me in the kitchen. Calm. Showed me the Instagram Zoom, Julian's hand. I denied. He said he'd been documenting for months. Dinners, texts, Riverside, witnesses, evidence. Prepare yourself. I panicked. Texted Nadia. She said bluffing. Delete everything. I scrubbed my phone like evidence. David left with a folder. I followed. He caught me, sent me home. His laptop, storage, delivery, notary. He closed it. Stop monitoring. Bryn's shower. Tension thick. Mom. Marriage takes work. Margaret. Honesty is everything. I hid in the bathroom, called Julian. He said soon we'd be together. Bryn cornered me, crying, "Tell me the truth. No drama at my wedding." I lied. She, "If you ruin it, I'll never forgive you." David later, "His family wants me uninvited." I'm still going, but they know I'm lying. Truth matters. Next 2 weeks, low profile. 1 quick coffee with Julian, kids only. Evan at bedtime. "Does Daddy still love you?" Broke me. Saturday. David returned with a thin manila envelope, locked in office. Tuesday night, kitchen table. "What's coming isn't personal. I gave you months to be honest. After this, lawyers only. Protect the kids." I asked if he'd take them. "I'm protecting them." I didn't sleep. Envelope. Calm voice. Kara's glare. Something was coming. I couldn't stop it. Bryn's wedding was perfect. Grand ballroom, city views, crisp November air. I got ready with her and Mom, hair and makeup flawless. Bryn glowed in her dress. For a few hours, I forgot David, the affair, the lies. Ceremony at 4. I sat with parents, David across with his family and Kara. Lily and Evan looked adorable. Bryn walked down the aisle. I was genuinely happy for her. Vows, kisses, applause. I posted a photo. Beautiful day for a beautiful bride. Cocktail hour, champagne, hors d'oeuvres. Nadia, my +1, said I looked amazing. We selfied. Family love. Then a woman in a pantsuit entered, scanned, locked on me. Heart pounding. She handed me an envelope. "You have been served." Gasps. I opened it. Divorce petition citing adultery. Temporary order. David gets the house. Parenting plan. He wants primary custody. I get supervised weekends. DNA test for the kids. I screamed David's name. He stood calm by the windows. Said he chose public for witnesses. I'd forced his hand after months of private attempts. Kara announced loudly. I'd been cheating, lying, painting David as villain. Room erupted in whispers, phones out. Bryn, tears streaming, screamed I'd ruined her wedding. Told me to leave. Mum read the papers, face white, asked if true. I nodded. "Dad, how long?" "Months." Bryn, "You turned us against him." Exhibit list, texts, posts, charges, photos, witnesses, pages of evidence. I ran to the garage. Family followed, admitted everything. Bryn, "Don't see me for a long time." Parents needed time. Phone blew up. "Nadia, don't contact me. Kara's post. Truth comes out. Proud of David. 200+ likes. Drove home. Police there enforcing order. Locks changed. Kids inside with David. They didn't run to me. DNA will settle it. Officer, collect items or leave. Drove to Highway Hotel in my wrinkled dress. Julian blocked me. Hearing, deck 4. Stared in mirror, makeup smeared, lies exposed. Lost husband, kids, family, friends, reputation. David won quietly with truth. I sat alone with the consequences I'd built, one lie at a time, fade to black.